Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Power Presence Position. And here's the deal. I know that so many of you are having a little bit of downtime as I record this episode. It's the holiday season, end of a mega year that was 2020. And you are thinking about ways to make 2021 a departure, a growth year, a powerful year, a fun year. How do you do that? Well, one important way is to reduce complexity. So one of the steps in reducing complexity is to understand how complexity starts to creep into your business and your life in the first place. And so in this episode, we are going to talk about one powerful way that complexity starts to creep into your business and your life. Specifically, it's how a scarcity mindset is feeding complexity in your life, in your business. We get into it in this episode. So here's the question. In a world where the rules of business have been written by men, how do women entrepreneurs like us, women who want to make millions of dollars and impact millions of lives, how do we create enormous success on our terms? That's the question, and this show explores the answers. Welcome to Power Presence Position. I'm your host, Eleanor Beaton, and I'm on a mission to double the number of women entrepreneurs who generate over $1 million per year in annual revenue. I'm an award-winning entrepreneur, author, and leadership coach. I'm a wife, mom of 2 boys, and I'm the CEO of a 7-figure business. Stick around because on this show, you'll learn how to think, communicate, and get paid like a 7-figure CEO. Let's go. Hello, Eleanor Beaton here. Welcome to Power Presence Position, episode number 435. And before I dive into the material that I've prepared for you so painstakingly, and I tell you, I have prepared this painstakingly because I actually prepared this podcast episode before going on a 2-week Christmas holiday vacation. Because for me, I celebrate Christmas. So a Christmas holiday vacation. And dang, that last week, which I'm currently in right now, it's the Thursday before a 2-week hiatus. It's a little painful. I'm having to do a lot of self-coaching. I need a break. And so one of the most powerful things for me to do before I went on break was record this episode. So I hope you enjoy it. It has been a hard one episode for me, for yours truly. But I want to let you know something super exciting. We are currently sitting at the number 29 spot in the entrepreneurship category in iTunes in this country. It's a super competitive category. There are thousands and thousands of podcasts being released onto the internet every single day. And I want to thank you so much for listening to this show, for sharing it, for telling your friends about it, for leaving reviews, because it's really helping us really sort of stand apart and get the hundreds of thousands, well over 1 million downloads that we've gotten so far, and the thousands of downloads that we get for every single episode. Thank you so much. I so appreciate it. And if you are listening to this show and you haven't had a minute to leave me a review, please go ahead and do so. They're super important in terms of really ensuring that other women just like you have the opportunity to check out the show. Okay, so let's talk about how scarcity mindset feeds complexity. And I have to tell you about something really amazing that happened recently. So I was sitting down with a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet actually documented the onboarding process for one of the 2 things that I sell. And even that, I mean, I can remember when I had a consulting business over the course of a year, I would do anywhere from 40 to 100 different deals. Every single one required a different proposal. It required a different quote. Every single one was a different type of job. My life was very, very complex. And now, and this is in large part to the work that I have done with respect to my own positioning and really eliminating complexity and clutter from my own business, I sell 2 things, which is pretty awesome. And so a lot of the attention and resources that I have go to streamlining those 2 things that I offer. And so I have about a year ago, actually, we were growing. And I knew that in order to continue scaling, it was really important that I make sure that I streamline that onboarding process, right? So when we welcome clients into this program, that it's very clear, there's a very clear series of steps. It's delineated, it's documented, there's a process around it. And there had been a process around it, but it was relatively informal. And I wanted to make sure that it was formal, that it was documented, and that we were following that process consistently so nothing got lost. And as you start to work with more customers and have more people moving through your business, that's a lot easier for that to happen, right? For things to get lost, for some people didn't get what they thought they were going to get because, it wasn't documented. So it was over a year ago now that I was like, okay, I know we're increasing the volume of clients that we're serving. So for me, it's really important. We can't keep this in our memory anymore. And so we need to take what has been a loosely outlined process and really formalize it a lot more. So that's what we did. And actually, I hired somebody to come in and work with me. She was kind of the lead on it. And then we had a number of team members. And at the time, what we did, our approach was to basically document everything that was currently happening at the time. So both what the customer experienced, but also what was happening backstage. So, I kind of outlined what it is that I wanted. We as a team went through all the things that happened, and we end up with a spreadsheet that has over 100 cells. So we did it in a Google Doc. We outlined, all of the steps that happen, and we literally had over 100 cells in that spreadsheet, which documented all the different, in painstaking detail, all the things that happened, both in terms of the customer experience, but also in terms of what we were doing behind the scenes. So I can remember when that project was completed, it was really, really exciting. And it was also quite overwhelming because there was just so much that was going on. It pained me to look at the spreadsheet because there was just so much detail. And then on top of the detail that we captured, we were also automating a lot of things. So we decided, with that many cells, if we've got 100, over 100 steps, then clearly we're going to need to introduce more automation into this process. And so that's what we did. That became very expensive because I was paying people to automate many of those 100 steps. So you can imagine, right? It's a big deal. It's a freaking big spreadsheet. There's a ton of automation that's happening behind the scenes. There was a ton of testing. Whenever you're automating at that scale, there's a lot of things that break. And so we're trying to figure out what those things are. It was a huge deal. And it was a really important process to go through. And I think if I went back, I'm not sure that I would do anything differently. And the reason for that is because of what I learned through that process. So that happened over a year ago now. And so recently I went back into that process. Actually, I shouldn't say recently because it was really sort of 6 months ago, I really started taking a look at that process and paying attention to the discomfort and overwhelm around it that I felt. So every time I looked at that onboarding process, I was like, I don't love this. I don't love this. It's working. It's totally working. But there's something about this that is making me uncomfortable. And I had a lot of stuff on the go. So I just, basically sat with that feeling of discomfort. But in the back of my mind, it was just sort of, my mind was working away on this level of complexity in this onboarding process. And then recently I sat down with a blank spreadsheet with the, that knowledge of those 100 steps that we worked so hard to document, to automate. We worked so hard. So many of us worked so hard to get that in place and take a look at that. So that was really important because I had that. So I had the material, those 100 steps that we had worked painstakingly to document what we were doing. I had the months of discomfort that it was too complex, that there was something wrong with it, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I also had, several months of my own brain and experience ticking away on this in the background while I was doing other things. And then I sat down, I applied base of pants to seat of chair. I thought deeply, and in about 1 hour, maybe 90 minutes, I made that 100 plus cell onboarding spreadsheet into 6 steps for a total of 13 cells. Okay, so we went from over 100 cells in the step-by-step onboarding process to 13 cells. So basically, in just over a year, I cut 87% of the complexity in our onboarding system out. We went from over 100 steps to 13 micro steps to 6 major steps with 13 sort of little actions in there. It was massive. And when I completed that process, so I completed it in the dang Google Sheet spreadsheet, I walked through it with various team members, sort of testing all the different potential scenarios that could happen. And the process just kept holding up. And I cannot tell you the degree of personal satisfaction that I got from those 13 steps, or the 6 steps with like the 13 cells, how much complexity and spaciousness I experienced from that drastic reduction in complexity in the client onboarding experience. So, and I would say that really the thing that came through to me is, wow, this is so easy. This is very simple. It's very clear. At any single point, any team member can come and see exactly what needs to happen next and you can see it. You don't have to scroll down. It's all right there. All of the, documents and email templates and order forms and the contracts, they're all hyperlinked in the document. This is our onboarding Bible, and it is simple, it is straightforward, and that is completely ready to be scaled. So when I had over 100 steps, my discomfort was just knowing that there was too much in there. And with 13 steps, it was so much simpler. So it was really powerful because here's the thing that I know for myself personally, and I see so much with women that I work with. You only grow things that you want to grow. And we are all smart enough, I think, to understand that when you scale, everything scales with you. So all of that complexity is going to scale if you allow it. And one of the things, and I think the mistake that I made, was that I knew that it was complex. So this was even more than a year ago. We were growing. And I knew that we had to have that system in place. The mistake that I made was trying to systematize before I had cut and eliminated complexity, because systems and processes will only scale the underlying complexity that you have unless you as the CEO first eliminate that complexity. And the thing is, it's hard. We want other people to do it for us. Please take this pain away. But the problem is that very few people are positioned to be able to reduce complexity, because you as the leader, you have a completely different vantage point. So you can benefit from their insight and experience. But I have found in small businesses, it's very difficult for anyone other than the CEO to reduce complexity, because quite frankly, you're the only one with the power to be able to distinguish between, this is an important step and this is not. And the power to decide we're cutting that right out of this whole process, right? So powerful, powerful, powerful. Now, I was recently speaking with a client, and this is a woman who took her business over $1 million this year, which is very exciting. The business basically doubled. Super exciting. And so we were kind of talking through, it was very exciting. We were celebrating and we were talking through what is coming up in 2021. And there's just a lot going on. And so we were sort of talking through things, and I realized that she was engaging in what I had engaged in, which was exporting complexity, right? And it's so, so easy to do. And so we talked about before, putting systems in place, what had to happen first is that she had to take some of that complexity out of the business first, reduce the number of things that they were doing, make decisions about what was truly important and what was extraneous, so that what they were focusing their attention on in terms of processes and stuff was the stuff that was truly important, right? So you don't want to export complexity to other people, which I think a lot of leaders try to do unwittingly. I have certainly tried to do that. You have to cut that complexity out yourself. So that is kind of a story to outline, my experience and just the gorgeousness of cutting 87% of the complexity out of the onboarding process. Super exciting. And right now I'm really delineating how I did that for my incubator clients, actually, to kind of walk them through that process and show them the spreadsheet, and so that they can create a very similar one, that for inside their businesses, because it's just gorgeous. It's so super exciting. But anywho, I digress. My point is, how in the world does that level of complexity get in there in the first place? How is it that something that currently has 6 major steps with 13 mini steps, how is it that something that requires 13 lines on a spreadsheet used to take over 100 lines? How the hell does that happen, right? That's the real question. So before you start eliminating complexity, I think it's really important to understand, where does complexity come from? What is it that drives smart women to have an onboarding process take 100 dang steps, right? Like, that is the most important question. It's all about the question, like how you define the problem. And for me, for example, if I were just to go and teach my clients, hey, here's how to create a simple onboarding process, that's great. And there's a place for that, and it's super useful. And I will be doing that, or, enhancing the teaching I already have about that with the gift of my own experience on this. But below that, there is the question of, what is it that contributes to complexity in the first place? And so that's what I wanted to take a little bit of time to explore here. And as I was studying this, what I started to see again and again and again is the biggest thing that feeds complexity is scarcity. It's lack. It's fear. It's this idea that there's never enough, that you have to have more, that what you have could be taken away, that when you get to the place where you feel like you have enough, now the biggest thing is not losing it, that what you do have is not enough. There's always someone who has more, so you better hurry up and get it. That supplies are limited, so you better get yours while they still last. That is scarcity mindset. And scarcity mindset is, I think, the biggest thing that feeds complexity in your business. So let me kind of break that down. I noticed a trend personally, and I had been seeing this for several years. And it was the idea. So, business is cyclical. So we all want it to be like a straight growth trajectory. But the reality is that it ebbs and flows. You'll have a run, several months or several years that are really good. And then you might plateau a little bit, and then you might dip, and then your growth trajectory might increase. That's typically how growth works, right? It's not a straight line. It's kind of more of a jagged line. And what I started noticing personally is that in the times when my company's growth was accelerating, I started to feel this internal tension. And it wasn't pressure, because nobody was pressuring me. I was putting pressure myself. So there's this tension. As things started accelerating, as our pace of growth started accelerating, I started feeling an internal tension that I needed to move faster, right? So I needed to speed up and I needed to hurry up. And I saw this again and again. And so what would happen is that everything that I was doing was working, growth was accelerating. And for it was driven by scarcity, I felt I needed to hurry up. So when we had strategies that were working really well and growth was accelerating, what I started to experience was, wow, this is awesome. What else can I do? Right? And so then I started doing more things. And now, rather than having one strategy to drive, I had like 1.5 or 2 or even 3 strategies to drive, because I wanted to take the growth I was experiencing and amplify that even more. Now, everything that I'm saying is, in fact, conventional business practice, right? When like more, grow faster, accelerate, take advantage of the momentum, yada, yada, yada. But the question was, where is that coming from? And it's really interesting. I was having a conversation with a friend who has been experiencing significant growth trajectories. And it was interesting as we were having a conversation, what I noticed was that her concern was losing ground, right? Her concern was losing what she has created and losing the momentum that she's experiencing. And again, that is on the one hand, a very normal human experience, but it is normal only because the come from is a scarcity mindset, right? So scarcity, the opposite of scarcity is not abundance. And so when people are like, oh, you need an abundant mindset, I actually think that does more harm than good, because the opposite of scarcity is the real problem here, right? The opposite of scarcity isn't abundance. There's a thing that you need to pass through, and the thing that you need to pass through is actually sufficiency. So I remember thinking about this when I was listening to Brooke Castillo's podcast, and she was talking about passing through neutral. Like sometimes if you're feeling really badly about something, you can't make yourself feel good about it. Sometimes you just have to sort of pass through neutral, allow yourself to feel neutral about it. Well, the same is true with a lot of mindset work. So when clients are experiencing scarcity mindset, you can't just make them, or they can't make themselves experience an abundance mindset. That's a complete swing of the pendulum, which can be hard to do. But what we can do is move into a sufficiency mindset. I have enough. You are enough. There is enough. And when you operate from this mindset, there is enough, that's when you are able to actually slow things down, to be deliberate, and to grow, to take advantage of that growth acceleration without getting frenzied and without adding in extra complexity. I remember one of my clients, Cheryl, told me, so she was a waitress in Detroit. She went on to have a really successful career in the automotive industry and now has a fabulous organization that promotes diversity and inclusion in automotive. But when she was a teenager and in her 20s, she was a waitress in Detroit. And the lunchtime traffic could be super, super busy. And I remember her telling me that the way that she dealt with that when it started getting busier and busier and busier, she's like, I felt like I had to hurry up, from this table to that table and get the orders and run into the kitchen and clear the dishes and yada, yada. But what she ended up doing, she's like, what I had to do was be deliberate. And I had to slow down and make sure every single one of my movements was deliberate. And when I did that, I was actually able to move faster. Right? My dad used to say, much haste, less speed. But think about the mindset of slowing yourself down and being deliberate. That is the sufficiency mindset. Hey, there's enough time. You have the time to move with deliberation from here to here, to carefully gather the dishes, to take them to the kitchen, to carefully prepare the check and give it to the customer. So I'm hoping that you are picking up what I'm putting down here. Scarcity drives us to do more and more and more and move faster and faster and faster. When you get into that frenetic energy place, you start to amplify inefficiency. You are not thinking, you're not being deliberate. So you're just like, yeah, whatever we need to do to get it done, let's do it. And that's how a process that could take 13 steps ends up taking 100 steps. Right? And here's the deal. You can't outrun or outwork complexity. Because I remember I used to tell myself, I just have to get through this month and then I'll be able to go back and take a look at this. That's not how it works, right? You can't feed complexity. And I'm not saying oversimplify either. Like there are places when, things can be complex, and to try to force a simple solution because you're uncomfortable with complexity, that doesn't work either. So let's not be dumb, let's be reasonable about this. But wherever you can, eliminate complexity. So there's two things that I'll leave you with as I wrap up this episode, two things that I'll leave you with here. The first thing is when it comes to complexity, and again, a lot of this is about pruning. So that more, and, getting to a place where an onboarding process is 100 steps, that is like, I'm all good with that. it was fine. We were still able to grow. It was fine. It wasn't ideal, but it was totally, totally fine. And really the only people that felt it was us. And the work was in reducing that complexity, right? So you have to honor where you're at. And that was just where I was at, where things took 100 steps. So I think that, first and foremost is, just be patient with yourself. But speaking of patience, if I had tried to go in and force myself to cut stuff out of that 100-step process quickly or rush it, i.e. not be deliberate, I think I would have ended up forcing a solution and skipping over important things. So I had to be patient and I had to not be in a rush to fix everything. And not being in a rush to fix things, allowing yourself to settle into the details, really observe, notice, slow it down and notice. And from that place, you start to eliminate complexity, where I find is that that's most effective. Anyway, I hope this podcast episode was useful to you. Really, this is so interesting. I was going to call this episode the 3 biggest sources of complexity in your business. And then I was like, I think I'm just going to knock out 2 of those sources of complexity and go for the master source of complexity, which I believe is to be scarcity mindset, and how scarcity drives us to pursue more, faster, but in the process, actually hamper our growth, right? You actually hamper your growth by doing that. And so that is about retraining your mind to approach growth from a place of sufficiency. All right, my fierce friends, I hope you found this podcast episode to be useful to you. If you did, please go ahead and leave me a review on iTunes or whatever podcast player you listen to. I hope you are having a fabulous holiday if you're taking some downtime. And I will see you in the same bat time, same bat place next week. And it's going to be 2021. If you love this show, then you will love even more my missives, i.e. my emails. If you're not on my email list yet, I strongly encourage you to sign up at eleanorbeaton.com/join. Now, when you go and sign up for my email list, you will quickly discover why some of the most popular, well-known, and influential voices in the world of women's entrepreneurship quietly, studiously, consistently open every single email I send out, because they want to be inspired, they want to be entertained, and also I think they really want to connect with a woman like myself who's in full command of her voice and is willing to open up and share her thinking, her ideas, and her story. I promise you that on this email list, you are going to be entertained. You are going to hear really valuable tips about stepping into your power as a leader. And you're also going to get fun insight that I do not share anywhere else. Go to eleanorbeaton.com/join. And I promise you it will be the highlight of your inbox.